And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another incredible installment of Cowboy State Politics Live from very, very high above all the puerile and bombastic twits in the Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the depths of the Middle Swamp in Wyoming's capital of Cheyenne. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Wednesday from the Swamp Studio. Man, I was thinking about that all day, and I don't even know. We can't really call the Cowboy State Politics Studio the Swamp Studio, though. I'm sure there are many in the Wyoming media and those who wish they had an outlet in the media that would refer to it as such. But anyway, greetings, my friends, music lovers, conversationalists, and political hacks. Welcome to Cowboy State Politics. We begin this morning, and you know what? Before I even go there, there's a lot of stuff to talk about that happened yesterday, well, this week, really, in the Wyoming legislature. The Senate passed the 50% tax cut on residential property taxes. That's pretty important. I think we'll talk about that during today's program. But one of the things that we haven't really looked at is any sort of the national news. So there's a couple of big stories that I want to talk about from the national media. And then we'll get into some of the property tax cuts because there's plenty to talk about there. From both sides, there's a lot of misinformation that's going on. And all of it, actually, the truth, all of it works in your best interests. The truth is, this 50% tax cut in residential property taxes, it's really not going to hit counties and towns as big as all of these fearmongers and the Democrat and the Redcoats have been saying that it's going to. In fact, it's really not going to amount to that big a hit for county revenues at all. But we'll get to that in a little bit later on in the program. I've got a soundbite from an episode I did a year ago. It was entitled 50% Really Equals 10%. And I go through a fairly detailed explanation as to why that 50% tax reduction is not going to result in this gigantic, huge, the sky is falling, the ceiling is going to crumble around our ears, loss in revenue. Though there are a lot of people that are saying it's going to. But anyway, we'll get to that. First, I want to begin with a piece I found in Breitbart. Trump is going to, the U.S. will take over Gaza. We're going to own it. And I quote, President Donald Trump said Tuesday that the U.S. would take over Gaza and remove debris, tunnels, and explosives left there by Hamas after the war with Israel, adding he saw America taking a, quote, long-term ownership position. Trump said the U.S. is going to take over the Gaza Strip, and we'll do a job with it, too. We'll love it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous bombs and other weapons on the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings and create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing. Seems to me that the new president, the Donald Trump, I still get confused. Is he the new president? Because he was president before, so it can't really be new. Anyway, it's Greenland, it's Panama, and now the Gaza Strip. The idea of actually taking over Gaza, quoting again from the article, and establishing a United States presence was both unexpected and completely new. Trump added that the U.S. would develop Gaza economically, sending troops if necessary, and making investments. He called the potential Gaza unbelievable and said that Palestinian control of Gaza will never work. He added, "You have to learn from history. We have an opportunity to do something phenomenal, the Riviera of the Middle East." Now, I absolutely agree with one thing he said there, that you have to learn from history. And the truth is, the Palestinians, the only reason they want control of Gaza is because it's close to Israel, and they hate Israel. And so that's a convenient way for them to attack our strongest ally and the only real democracy in the region. History has proven that the Palestinians really don't want to develop Gaza. That was never their intent. In fact, if you look to the charter of Hamas, the group that the Palestinians voted into office, and that's an important thing that I think a lot of people gloss over, that Hamas, strangely, was democratically elected in Gaza. And so, it kind of calls into question a lot of the folks that live there. Right after the October 7th massacre, attack, whatever you want to call it, I went through a fairly detailed explanation of how big Gaza is. And really, it's roughly 60 square miles, or around the size of Washington, D.C. And if you take the number of rockets that were fired from Gaza into Israel, it means that there were rockets fired from every single acre in Gaza. And so, and frankly, an acre is not that big. And so if you're living in Gaza and there's rockets fired from every single acre in that place, or enough rockets to cover every acre, the chances are is that that those rockets are there. Secondly, Israel went to great lengths to tell everybody to get the heck out, that they were going to bomb Gaza into the Stone Age. And they didn't, and a lot of them didn't go. So it kind of means that the folks that stayed there really not all that interested in, having peace in the region. But anyway, here is what Donald Trump said about Gaza. Listen to this. Hold on here. Take it off mute. Okay, go for it.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area. Do a real job, do something different. Just can't go back. If you go back, it's going to end up the same way it has for 100 years.
Now, the fascinating part about this whole thing is Benjamin Netanyahu was standing right beside him when he said this. From the piece, Netanyahu, quote, Netanyahu, who had never publicly advocated for anything like what Trump proposed, said that the idea was, quote, something that could change history and that it was worth considering. It is considered taboo, even in Israel, to advocate for the transfer of Palestinians from Gaza or from Judea and Samaria, which is also and which has been called the West Bank. It's not the West Bank; it's Judea and Samaria. But Trump has previously proposed buying Greenland, so he is not averse to the idea of America taking over territory abroad. However, the idea of taking over a war-torn Gaza is completely unique and quite possibly revolutionary. Now, I don't know exactly how I feel about, Trump's suggestions that we start taking territory. Now, with Panama, I think that one's a little bit different because, as we know, if you're going to negotiate with anybody, you always start from a position of asking for more than you actually want. And wouldn't you know it, right after Trump came in office, Marco Rubio, after Rubio was confirmed, he goes down to Panama, and now the Panamanians ripped up the agreement between them and China about the Panama Canal. So a lot of what you're hearing from Donald Trump, in some cases, is just a negotiating tactic. At least that was the case with Panama. Who knows if he's serious about Gaza? Now, Greenland, hey, I'm all in favor of that one. Greenland has had a United States air base on it for some time, and it's one that's only accessible from the air. But really, Denmark hasn't really done anything with Greenland for a really, really long time. So, why the heck not? It remains to be seen what's going to happen with Gaza or with Greenland, or we're kind of seeing some results with Panama. But who knows what's going to happen? Moving on. Gavin, and here is another interesting story, and I think this is typical of how the Democrats operate. Gavin Newsom goes to the White House to beg for federal money after his legislature passes anti-Trump spending. Now, if you'll notice, at the inauguration, there was all sorts of people that had vowed, or maybe vowed is too strong of a word, but had really attacked Trump for the last 8 years. Jeff Bezos was there, Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, all of those guys are now apparently buddy-buddy with our good pal Trump. From Breitbart, and I quote, Governor Gavin Newsom is heading to the White House on Wednesday to ask President Donald Trump for federal money to address California's wildfires after state legislators passed $50 million to fund anti-Trump measures. Newsom himself agreed to the $50 million deal in mid-January, with fires still burning in the Los Angeles area, after complaining that Trump wanted to, quote, politicize the fires by talking about the state's failed water policies and forestry. The spending came out of the special legislative session called by Gavin Newsom himself. The state assembly passed the anti-Trump funding right away, and while the state Senate balked at first, it also passed the funding earlier in the week, according to the Sacramento Bee, and I quote, Governor Gavin Newsom will meet with federal officials this week, aiming to secure federal disaster relief money after a series of wildfires devastated the Los Angeles area. Newsom's office said Tuesday that the governor had left for Washington, D.C., where he is expected to meet Wednesday with members of President Donald Trump's administration and members of Congress. Politico reported that he is also to meet with Trump, but a spokesperson for Newsom declined to confirm, saying his schedule had not yet been finalized. The problem here is you have a lot of governors that are really quick to the microphone to say that they are going to fight President Trump any way that they can. You know, Gavin Newsom, they passed $50 million of things that are meant to fight President Donald Trump. No doubt it's measures to combat ICE and a whole bunch of different stuff. But when brass taxes come about, when you have wildfires that pretty much almost destroyed Los Angeles, and you've wasted all of your state money and you haven't engaged in any sort of responsible forestry or anything like that, then you come crawling back to the administration. It's typical of what most Democrats do, and I expect that he's going to get the cold shoulder welcome that Gavin Newsom rightly deserves. Or there is a possibility that Trump treats him just like he did Jeff Bezos and all those other guys that attacked Trump for a decade. So I don't know. I mean, it's entirely hypocritical for Gavin Newsom or anybody else after you've destroyed your own state to come begging the federal government to help you out. Well, we're a little bit before the quarter of the hour, but let's go ahead and take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about this 50% tax cut that the Wyoming Senate passed yesterday. There's a lot that goes into it. I've got a bunch of sound bites, and I'll do some explaining about what it should do, what it won't do, and why they're all screaming that the sky is falling. More in a minute. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live on the Independence Network. You're not going to find a better source of news, information, and entertainment than right here on the Independence Network. Now, we're making a few changes, moving a couple things around, out with the old and in with the new, and that whole spiel. Of course, you could listen to my program, The Ramble Room with Ken Pendergraft, Locked and Loaded with the good Representative Tony Locke from Casper. There's a whole bunch more coming on the Independence Network. Also, don't forget to check out the articles section at the website, independencenetwork.us. It's loaded with op-eds, commentary, and news from all around the Cowboy State. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, Well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, on Rumble, pretty much anywhere. Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone. Documented to be almost always right 98.97% of the time. Now, as I mentioned before the break, the Wyoming Senate passed the 50% property tax cut yesterday, and they're claiming that it would be the largest in Wyoming's history. Now, I suppose, in a manner of speaking, they're correct, and so is the cow pie on this one, but it seems to me that the Wyoming voters already passed that one, the People's Initiative to reduce property taxes by 50%. I know, potato, but let's be accurate. Oh, and by the way, before I get into this, I went ahead and opened up the phone lines. If you want to be part of the program, the phone number here at the Swamp Studio is 307-374-8989, 307-374-8989 if you want to weigh in on any of this property tax stuff. It's a big conversation, and I'm sure that just about everybody out there's got an opinion. So if you want to talk about it, go ahead and give me a call, 307-374-8989. But we begin in the cow pie. In an article entitled, Senate Passes 50% Property Tax Cut Would Be Largest in Wyoming History. And I quote, the Wyoming Senate passed a property tax bill Tuesday, February 4th, that at a 50% cut would be the largest in state history. Opponents say not providing money to replace the revenue will devastate communities, while supporters say it's a true tax cut. The Wyoming Senate has passed what its leadership calls the largest tax cut in Wyoming history. Senate File 69, as passed on third reading Tuesday, would slash taxes by 50% and offer no backfill money for local schools and governments. The bill passed on a 23-8 vote and now moves on to the House. The House already passed its own version of the bill on January 23rd. In a statement handed out as the bill was being voted on, Senate President Bo Beitman said the bill sends a message to Wyoming voters that they'll get real action on property taxes instead of political grandstanding and out-of-state influence. Quote, if you're looking for drama, infighting, political grandstanding, and interference from out-of-state special interests, there's plenty of that elsewhere, Beitman wrote. But here in the Wyoming Senate, we come together to do the work of the people, diligently and seriously. Today, that serious work delivers results to the people of Wyoming. When asked about the statement by reporters after the vote, Beitman wouldn't clarify which out-of-state interests he was referring to, but indicated he believes they have pervaded the Wyoming House. Seems to me that the Wyoming House was the first branch of government to pass a large tax cut, though it wasn't at 50%, it was at 25%. So I don't really understand why Beitman's complaining about the House, except that he has to position himself and the Senate as more conservative than the House of Representatives. Because, of course, before the session ever got started, it was yours truly that pointed out that he pretty much made a deal with all the liberals. And so to prove that narrative wrong or that argument wrong, he's got to try to position the Senate as more conservative. And admittedly, up until now, they've been doing a pretty good job passing conservative bills, though I don't think that we've seen the results of that deal, and I don't think that we're really going to see that until we hit crossover. But, you know, it's a big question mark, and who knows? Now, to this property tax cut there's a lot of smoke around it. But essentially what it boils down to is a 50% reduction in property taxes of residential property. So it doesn't really deal with commercial property or mining or anything like that, or, you know, extractive industries. It's on residential real property. And the truth is that the vast majority of property tax the vast majority of revenue that comes into your county does not come from residential property taxes. It comes from commercial and minerals and those sorts of things. Residential property taxes make up a small percentage of the revenue that's generated for each individual county. A little over a year ago, back last January, I published an episode entitled 50% Really Equals 10%. And I discussed an actuarial study that was done by Sheridan County resident Rich Bratton. And he went through all of the numbers from the People's Initiative. Now, granted, the People's Initiative is a little bit different than this tax cut, but when you get down to it, the nuts and bolts are the same. Let me go ahead and play for you an excerpt from that episode because I think it clearly illustrates how this whole thing is going to work and how, though we're hearing a lot from county governments and elected officials, how this is going to cause the ceiling to crumble around our ears and the sky is falling and no more police and no more fire and all that crap, how really all of that is just hyperbolic redcoat rhetoric. So here's what I said 1 year ago.
From just reading the Property Tax Initiative, it's pretty clear that the numbers of people that will actually qualify for it are far lower than what your legislators are leading you to believe. What's even more striking is when you actually look at the dollar numbers, how this property tax initiative is really going to affect counties. Sheridan County's budget for 2024 is $24,861,650. Because I like round numbers, we'll just say $25 million. Residential property taxes only account for 34% of Sheridan County's total budget. That leaves you with $8.5 million. Now remember, only 71% of homes in Wyoming are primary residences. So you do the math on that one, that leaves you $6,035,000. And 83% of that for people who have lived in their home for more than 1 year, and you're left with $5,009,050. And a 50% reduction per the ballot initiative leaves you with $2,504,525. Almost exactly a 10% reduction. It was not that long ago that Governor Gordon ordered the state to reduce all of their budgets by 10% across the board. And correct me if I'm wrong, I might be mistaken on this one, but state government did not fall down around its ankles.
Exactly right. So the real reduction in total government revenues is more around 10%, at least in Sheridan County. Now, we can't say that every county in Wyoming is the same because it's not. Some counties have more minerals than others. Some counties have way less revenue than others. But when you look at it on average across the state, residential property taxes don't amount for a majority of the revenue. In fact, it's far less than that. So really, this 50% reduction is not going to be that big a deal for county governments. Now, one major point of discussion in the House of Representatives yesterday was that we don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. And if you look, and there's a great picture, if you're down in the Wyoming Capitol, right outside the Appropriations Committee room, there's an analysis that was put out by Don Richards. Don Richards is like the budget guru of the Legislative Service Office. And it points out that our spending is at such a level that if oil drops $10 a barrel, which, let's be honest, that's not all that unusual. Sometimes oil drops 20 or 30 bucks a barrel. But at a $10 drop in the price of oil would mean that Wyoming will be bankrupt in 4 to 6 years. Imagine that. All of the money that we're spending right now, the fabulous schools that we're building, all of the money that we're funneling to education, which is an obscene amount, we could be broke in 4 to 6 years. Absolutely incredible. But that just points to our level of spending. And it's, again, we don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. And that is what a lot of these people are worried about. So take, for example, Stacey Jones. Stacey Jones is from Sweetwater County, and I love this. She's talking about a video that was put out by the Rock Springs mayor, and probably I'll try to put together a soundbite for tomorrow's broadcast, but it is absolutely hyperbolic rhetoric that has no moorings in reality. But here's what Stacey Jones said on the floor of the Senate yesterday. Listen to this, and then we'll talk about it.
This effect into my community, I can give you some examples. One of our mayors did have a post yesterday and some of the things that we're looking at losing. And
okay, all right, hold on. So obviously, if the mayor says it, it has to be true. But the funny thing is, when you watch the video, and I'll go ahead and repost it on Cowboy State Politics on the Cowboy State Politics Facebook page. But when you watch the video, he's reading off of something that he already prepared, and it's pretty clear that he didn't write it, that it was somebody else. He stumbles a number of times, but the whole thing is a bunch of bull crap. And here's Stacey Jones, and she's going to repeat a lot of the BS that the Rock Springs mayor said. All right, let's continue.
Southwest part of the state is lost jobs. We might be losing our civic center, losing our rec center, closing a softball complex, which is used by adults and children. Our senior center is at stake here. And just for everybody else, if that doesn't apply to you, the snow removal from your streets is a pretty large concern.
The one thing that Stacey Jones left out was the Broadway Theater in downtown Rock Springs. You know, the one that puts on all the drag shows? That one's funded by the city, too. First, a lot of those things that Senator Jones mentioned is not the proper role of government. It is not the proper role of government to have a civic center, nor is it the role of government to have a recreation center. One of the things that she didn't mention that the mayor does in that dumb video is the golf course. Since when is it the government's job to make sure that you can go play golf? And secondarily, how many of your residents actually play golf? My guess is it's not a majority. Point being, is that a lot of this is, overhyped, hyperbolic. It's not all going to happen. Now, are there some counties that are going to see a larger impact from this property tax cut? Yeah, absolutely. It's simply because they don't have the minerals that other counties do. But by and large, we're not talking about that big a deal. Now, I want to factor in one more thing. This morning, in about 30 minutes, the House of Representatives is going to start second reading on the budget, the supplemental budget. And here is what one of the members of Appropriations gave me last night. You're going to love this, that there are 44 amendments that are up for debate on second reading of the budget today. Those 44 amendments amount to requests of an increase in spending of $345 million. Now, remember, this is just a supplemental budget. The governor said that this is just supposed to be emergencies and unforeseen circumstances, but you have a bunch of people in the House of Representatives that want to add $345 million to the supplemental budget at a time when people in the other house, on the other side of the building, are saying this is going to devastate communities. And by the way, that $345 million, that accounts for 35 brand new full-time employees. All of that, folks in the House are wanting to cram into the supplemental budget. So what I'm saying is a lot of these folks, both in the House and in the Senate, will not admit that what we actually have is a spending problem. Now, Wyoming citizens saw that loud and clear after last year's budget, the largest budget that has ever been passed in Wyoming history. What did voters do? We threw the bums out and elected a bunch of conservatives. There was a huge turnover in the House of Representatives. And no matter what Bo Beitman says in his press release, that it's rhetoric and that it's out-of-state interest in the House, it is only the House that is pointing out that, maybe we do have a spending problem. Now, I'll give Senator Beitman credit. He did get this 50% tax cut passed. Good for him. I think that's an absolute accomplishment. But I think that we have to pay attention to what is being said on the floor, because there's a lot of folks that voted for this thing that they have a completely different motivation for it. Now, I played this soundbite for you before. I can't remember if it was on the podcast or if it was on a live program. But in committee, when they were debating Senate File 69, which that's the one that just passed, Senator Nancy Case, said this. Listen closely.
This would be the backfill.
The backfill.
And I would support removing the backfill. I think if we're going to create a crisis, let's create a crisis.
If we're going to create a crisis, let's create a crisis. Of course, it was Senator Slithers that told the cow pie that Wyoming citizens need to understand the repercussions and the consequences to tax cuts. In other words, let's create a crisis, let's create a funding crisis, and make them pay for it so that they never ask for us to cut taxes again. And there were a lot of other comments on the floor of the House. So, for example, here is Democrat Chris Rothfuss. Listen to this one.
We have to be realistic about the implications of property tax cuts. Backfills try to make an imagination where we don't have to accept the downside, but we can have the upside. And we can do that for maybe a couple of years by burning through our capital. I think we need to hold against backfills. We need to look at this consideration, look at this policy decision with our eyes wide open, and the people of the state need to be looking at it with their eyes wide open and understand the implications of a tax cut, rather than us trying to create some machinations to pretend that they don't have implications, Mr. President.
Now, so one of those implications needs to be that we spend too much money. And if Wyoming citizens are demanding a tax cut, which I think that you could take the last election as a mandate to do something about our ever-increasing property taxes, which, by the way, one of those solutions is not this bill, though, again, this bill is a great step forward, but one of the solutions is going to come out of the House of Representatives, and it's acquisition value, that it is reform, not relief. And this is a very important point, that all of the property tax measures that have been passed thus far, last year, the year before, and some of them that are up for debate this time around, are not reform. They are relief. Reform is actually changing the system so that it doesn't create the same amount of problems in our property tax system. And the problem I'm referring to is your tax is increasing by 100% or 50 to 100% year over year. My family's taxes went up a whole crap load. And admittedly, we've got more property than a lot of people do, but still our property taxes went up a great deal. Way more than the rate of inflation. And the reason for that is somebody moves to town and they purchase the property in your neighborhood for $200,000, $400,000 more than it's actually worth, and that raises the price of your property, even though you don't realize that gain. That's called an unrealized capital gain, and it's absolutely wrong. But reforming the system is preventing that situation, preventing the dramatic increases in your property taxes year over year. Now, relief, on the other hand, is this 50% reduction. Now, remember, it's only temporary. It doesn't change the entire system. It just gives you some tax relief. Similarly, the property tax refund. That's relief. That doesn't change the underlying structure of how we assess property taxes. So all of those measures, while good, are just relief, but they don't solve the problem. In other words, it's just a series of Band-Aids. What we need is property tax reform, and that is fixing the system so we don't create this problem in the future. In my not so humble opinion, that is acquisition value. Now, there was a lot of discussion on the floor of the House yesterday that, it's unconstitutional, that you have to tax things uniformly. Well, what could be more uniform than the taxes are assessed on what you paid for it? What you paid for it is clearly the market value of the property, and if it wasn't, you wouldn't have paid that amount. And so the uniform taxation is 9.5% on what you paid for your property. That seems to be a fair way of doing it. And if you didn't believe that your property wasn't worth that amount, then you wouldn't have paid that amount. I mean, it's as simple as that. Now, there's a lot more to this article, and I'll get to it after the break. But let's go ahead and get a word in from our sponsors. Somebody's got to make some money besides the government. And, God knows, being down here in the swamp takes a lot. So let's get a word in from our sponsors. More in a minute. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics live every Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. on the Independence Network. Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Cowboy State Politics is sponsored by FreedomGoldUSA.com. They are the working man's gold company. The economy is in turmoil. The stock market pretty much is out of control, and you never know what's going to happen with your finances or your income. One way that you can shore up everything is by investing in gold and silver. Go to freedomgoldusa.com/David for a free interview to discuss your options and find out if gold or silver is right for you. One more time, that's freedomgoldusa.com/David. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live, Wyoming's conservative voice. That's right, my friends. Nobody has a program that is more listened to than Cowboy State Politics. And now, my friends, you know, I get a great charge out of every time I get to do this, but I want to introduce to you the newest sponsor to Cowboy State Politics, and that is Honor Wyoming. It's a political advocacy organization. I'm sure that you've seen a lot of advertisements on social media, and we've struck an arrangement where they're going to be one of the sponsors of the program. So let me go ahead and play for you the first ad that's going to be heard on the podcast. This is the first advertisement from Honor Wyoming.
Concerned about the future of Wyoming, but unsure how to help? Honor Wyoming is giving you the chance to create real, lasting influence. And it's as easy as 1, 2, 3. The Honor Wyoming Bill Tracker is designed to empower Wyoming voters. We're cutting through the noise and equipping you with all the info you need to keep tabs on Wyoming lawmakers, as well as the tools to take action on the issues that matter to you most. Keeping a close eye on key legislation in Cheyenne, we've made it easy to stay informed by providing real-time bill updates and timely take action alerts. Our one-click links make it easy to email key lawmakers at the right time. All you have to do is click and your voice will be heard. Ensuring lawmakers are listening to the people they serve year-round. Protecting the Wyoming way isn't a spectator sport, and voting is only half the story. Get involved today and do your part. With the Honor Wyoming Bill Tracker, it's as easy as 1, 2, 3.
All right. Welcome to Cowboy State Politics, Honor Wyoming. I'm pleased to that we could strike a deal, and I'm looking forward to everything we can do in the future. So that's the newest sponsor to Cowboy State Politics, Honor Wyoming. Now, if you want to be part of the program this morning, talk about this property tax thing, the phone number here in the studio is 307-374-8989. 307-374-8989. If you want to weigh in on this whole property tax thing or anything else, go ahead and give me a call. Now, while I said that this 50% reduction in property taxes is a good thing, and I'm glad that the Senate passed it, there were a number of senators, much like Chris Rothfuss and Stacey Jones, that were not exactly all that enthused with it. From the Cowboy article, many people who spoke against the bill Tuesday expressed concern about the fiscal impact it will have on local schools and governments, as the bill will have at least a $288 million fiscal impact this year. That's statewide, okay? And that's what they're saying, right? But if we go with the analysis that I gave you in the very beginning on residential property taxes, it's really not going to amount to that much. While speaking in favor of the bill on the floor, Beitman accused Senate members of opposing the cut, of looking for excuses to not give tax relief. Quote, "Let's not make perfect the enemy of the good," Beitman said. "What the people wanted us to do is deliver." Senator Slithers, Tara Nethercott, brought the amendment to restore the bill to a 50% cut, which was approved in a 1912 vote. Nethercott stressed that the legislature will have a multitude of ways to try and address the loss of tax revenue in the future, but did not provide a specific mechanism when speaking with reporters after the bill passed, other than a commitment to work with local communities. Senator Larry Hicks spoke against the bill, saying it would be better for the legislature to let local governments reduce their mill levy rates and address the issue of cutting taxes themselves. Now, while I agree with the sentiment, we have no indication whatsoever that local governments are at all interested in reducing taxes. In fact, really, the only measures we see from local governments, county and municipal level, is to increase taxes, to continually increase spending. I've seen no indication whatsoever of any county saying, hey, you know what, we tax our people too much. Maybe we ought to reduce that. In fact, it's almost always the opposite, that we have more of the people's money, so we may as well spend it. Oh, and by the way, we want to spend more money, and so we have to tax you more. Senator John Kolb, back to the article, agreed about subverting local control, saying his county hasn't seen large property tax increases and his local government has made cuts, not expanded, in recent years. He believes that local fire districts will be devastated as a result of the cut. Kolb said the cut should have been kept at 25%. Well, John Kolb's district is also Rock Springs, and evidently he's also been listening to the Rock Springs mayor, who did in his videos say that, well, we aren't going to have fire protection. We're not going to have police, nothing, no drag shows at the Broadway Theater. The golf course is going to close. And so much for your recreation center. Well, maybe you shouldn't have built those things in the first place, and you shouldn't be sponsoring drag shows at the Broadway Theater. Senator Mike Giroux, who voted in favor of the bill, said reality and political rhetoric are colliding and at a crossroads, and Wyoming taxpayers must bear witness to the collision. This is more rhetoric like Senator Nethercott told the Cowboy last week that there are consequences to tax cuts, and Wyoming citizens need to understand that. Or, as Senator Case said, if we're going to create a crisis, let's create a crisis. Let's see here. Senator Charlie Scott disagreed, saying the state will be able to easily afford the tax cut as long as it restrains its spending. And that right there is the key point, that government does not have a revenue problem. We haven't had a revenue problem in a very long time. What we do have, and what we have had for a very long time, is a spending problem. I'm helping another legislator with a different bill, and this one it's going to be up in committee on Friday, but it's going after all of the fees. The dues, fees is a wrong word, all the dues that are paid to all of these associations and organizations. And just at the state level, and just think about this, right? Just the dues for all of the associations that state employees and elected officials are part of, that amounts to $3.2 million every year. That's just the dues to join another group. One of those is the Chinese Communist Party-linked National Coalition of State Legislators. That one, we pay $269,000 to every single year. We waste a tremendous amount of money. And there are very few people in the Wyoming legislature that even want to go after any of that. It is absolutely incredible, the spendthrifts we have in state government. Let's see here. Go to Chris Rothfuss from the Cowboy article. He called the bill, quote, irresponsible policy, and said his constituents are worried about what it will do in the future of education funding in Wyoming. Fixing the problem in the future, he said, will be a very tall order. Quote, we all know that it's an awful lot harder to pass a new tax. Nethercott responded, criticizing Rothfuss's home of Albany County as not representing the views of the state, and said people in Wyoming generally need property tax relief. Keep in mind, this is also the same person, Slithers, who said that we need to pay the consequences of tax cuts. So which one is it, Slithers? Is it we have to pay the consequences, or we really need a tax cut? I mean, the contradiction in political rhetoric coming from these redcoats in the Senate is truly astounding. Now, while I absolutely do agree that we are having the bejesus taxed out of us. We got to be honest about the people that are behind this, what they're thinking, what they're doing, what they're saying, and how they're voting. Because all four of those things, they don't all the time gel together, and they're certainly not when it comes to Senator Slithers. Let's see here. But the whole point of it is that there are different motivations for voting for this bill. But, sometimes politics makes strange bedfellows. And in this case, it's absolutely true. So what I would expect going forward is the House of Representatives that thing is probably going through the House. No problem. I see no reason to expect that any sort of local government backfill would be added to it. I think it's going to sail right through and end up on the governor's desk. Now, what the governor does with it, I think, is another question entirely. Last year, he vetoed a 25% tax cut. That was Senate File 54. So I see no reason why he wouldn't veto this one also. But again, who knows what the leftist in the mansion is going to do. I certainly don't, and probably nobody else does either. So it's a big question mark, just like the rest of the stuff that's going to happen in the Senate. Coming up, I want to go back to some national news. There's some George Soros-backed radio stations. They're doing some bad stuff. Who would have saw the problem with this coming? We'll do that, and the 5,000 FBI employees that were working on January 6th cases while crime skyrocketed. That after the break. Christmas is over, and all of the fun holiday cheer has been had. And what are we all left with? Frigid Wyoming weather. Below freezing temperatures that you still have to go out in. That's right, you do have to go back to work at one point or another. And not to scare you, but think about this. Every single morning, you get to scrape the ice off of your windshield. Now, while I can't do anything with that, I can make sure that your feet stay nice and toasty warm while you're doing it. All you have to do is order a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They are the finest socks that I've ever put on my feet. And to get you a pair of them, go to the website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Wyoming is one of the most sought-after places to live. There's a lot of people that want to move to our great state. And if you're thinking about selling your house to one of them, you need a real estate agent that you can trust. That agent is Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She's lived in Jackson for almost 20 years and has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market. Last year, she sold almost $25 million worth of property. So if you're thinking of buying or selling, give Rebecca a call. Her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Cowboy state politics is only going to get stronger. The program is only going to continue to expand. Take that as a message, Redcoats. There's nothing you can do to stop this program. And that goes for you, too. People like Wyoming gun owners, I got something coming for you. You're going to absolutely love it. Anyway, my friends, back on topic. I don't know if you missed this story or not, but several months ago, it came out that George Soros purchased a whole bunch of radio stations in the United States. Well, the FCC has now opened up an investigation. Talk about being late to the party, a little bit too much, too little, too late. Anyway, And they've opened up an investigation into all of these Soros-backed radio stations for broadcasting live locations of undercover ICE agents. Now, who would have saw this coming? That you allow one of the spooky dude himself to purchase all of these radio stations, and then you're surprised when he does nefarious things with them. From Breitbart, and I quote, "The FCC has launched an investigation into radio stations backed by leftist billionaire George Soros for broadcasting the live locations of undercover immigration and customs enforcement agents." My first question is, who let these Soros-backed radio stations know the location of undercover agents? Who let that one out of the bag? Anyway, as Breitbart News reported last year, a group of backed by Hungarian-born Soros purchased over 200 Odyssey radio stations and even took foreign investments to make this bid. The radio stations cover over 40 media markets in the U.S., giving the leftist billionaire unprecedented control over communication. According to Fox News, one of those stations, KCBS 740 AM in San Francisco, has come under scrutiny from the FCC for, quote, revealing live locations of the undercover ICE agents, their vehicles, and noting that they were conducting deportation operations in San Jose. Quote, "The FCC's Enforcement Bureau has already sent a formal letter of inquiry to the radio station as part of the FCC's investigation. The Enforcement Bureau proceeding is inquiring whether the radio station, which is licensed to operate by the FCC, is violating the terms of the license." Again, who really saw this one coming? I mean, it seems pretty logical to me that this sort of stuff is going to happen, specifically when you let a bad guy in control of radio stations. Speaking of bad guys, over the past year, there were over 5,000 FBI employees who worked on January 6th cases while crime skyrocketed. Now, it is important to point out that the total number of FBI employees is 13,000. So a very large number of the FBI was dedicated, and diverted, I guess, to prosecuting January 6th cases, while illegal immigrant crime skyrocketed across the United States. And I quote, "FBI officials acknowledged over 5,000 employees worked on the investigations related to January 6th, according to CNN. The numbers reveal that for the first time, the scope of the federal government's resources devoted to the J6 investigations, which took place while violent crime in urban America soared 40% from 2019 to 2023 under the Biden administration, according to the federal government's own numbers. The Department of Justice asked the FBI Friday to provide by Tuesday at noon the details of all of its employees who worked in the January 6th investigation." Okay, so I was wrong about the total number of FBI employees. Here's the next paragraph. "The agency, which employs around 38,000 employees and 13,000 agents," there we go, that's where the number 13,000 came from, "provided details for more than 5,000 employees it says worked on January 6th. CNN did not break down the roles of those 5,000 employees. Trump has alleged the Department of Justice and FBI were weaponized against him and his supporters at the expense of crime-fighting missions. He pledged during his campaign to root out the corruption in the federal government and refocus federal law enforcement agencies on their intended functions." Like, I don't know, preventing crime and not prosecuting grandmas who just happen to be on the federal grounds. I mean, and that's when you get down to the gravity with the real impact of all of these investigations. I mean, you jailed mostly innocent Americans for years, in some cases years at a time without trial. That's something that this country doesn't do, unless, of course, the Democrats are in charge. Joe Biden and his administration made it their mission to prosecute and persecute innocent Americans who were just exercising their freedom of speech. Now, I'm not defending any of the people that destroyed anything in the Capitol, that broke windows or anything like that. The vast majority of people at January 6th really didn't do anything wrong anyway. They just happened to be in the wrong place, wrong time. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with assembling to ask for a redress of grievances. I mean, that's in the Constitution. It's in the Bill of Rights. And the Biden administration, they really didn't give a crap about it, which is why they devoted a huge number of FBI employees to prosecuting these crimes. Well, hopefully Donald Trump is going to right that wrong. And I mean, he did issue pardons for, all of the people in there that were involved in January 6th, so that's a good thing. But like I said, we got to make sure that this sort of thing never happens again. That's not what America does. We don't. It's not a matter of show me the man, I'll show you the crime, as Lenin said. We're a nation of laws. We're not a nation of men. If a law is violated, then we prosecute. But there again, you have the presumption of innocence, that it's the government's job to prove that you're guilty, not for you to have to prove that you're innocent. And in many cases, that has been the the juxtaposition of law enforcement in this country for at least the last couple of years. That under the Biden administration, that you had to prove that you were innocent. Not the other way around, that the government had to prove you were guilty. It was an absolute travesty, and thank God that we're getting it rooted out, and hopefully it never happens again. Let's see here. We've got about 6 minutes left in the program. Now, here's an interesting one. And, one of the reasons why I started Cowboy State Politics Live is I needed a platform to talk about national issues. There's a lot of people that they really just only focus on national issues. Now, I still argue, it's still a fact that the things that affect you and your life and your family's life more directly is what happens at the state level. And the truth is, while the swamp may not be as broad, the Cheyenne Swamp may not be as broad as the one in Washington, D.C., it still has the same depth. I mean, there are still political actors that are trying to take as much of your money as possible and spend it in nefarious ways. I mean, there's all sorts of different swampy things that happen, which is why I started the Cowboy State Politics podcast, so I can tell you all about this stuff that's happening in Wyoming. But there again, there's a lot of people that they just focus on national issues. And so I needed a platform to opine on those. And that's why we have Cowboy State Politics Live. Oh, by the way, another shameless plug while I'm at it. If you missed the program, if you ever missed the program, I've opened up a new channel to the podcast, and all of it is just going to be all of the Cowboy State Live episodes. And every morning that we have Cowboy State Politics Live, I'm just going to publish it to that channel. If you go to the website, there's a link up at the top that says live replays. That'll take you right to it. And so if you miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics Live, you can always go back and listen to it. It'll be enshrined there for as long as I'm around. You've got a record. You can go back and listen to everything. And because I know that not everybody can listen at 8 o'clock in the morning. Lord knows I'm really not a morning person either. But with the rest of the program, here's another interesting piece. A lot of people have been irritated about all the money that we've given to Ukraine. Well, the establishment media is now complaining that Donald Trump is saying that, maybe instead of just giving you all this money to Ukraine, maybe we're going to trade it for rare earth minerals. That's one of the things that we need a lot of. And, considering all of the all the new inventions, the renewable power and, electric vehicles and all the computer chips, you have to have rare earth minerals to make that sort of stuff. So now Trump is saying that Ukraine should pay for all the aid with their rare earth minerals. And I quote, President Donald Trump said on Monday that he wants Ukraine to trade rare earths and other things for continued American military and financial support. The office of Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky seems amenable to the idea, while the invading Russians do not like it at all. Quote, we're telling Ukraine they have very valuable rare earths. We're looking to do a deal with Ukraine where they're going to secure what we're giving them with their rare earths and other things. We want a guarantee. We're handing them money hand over fist, Trump said in one of his freewheeling Oval Office chats with reporters. I want to have security of rare earths. We're putting in hundreds of billions of dollars. They have great rare earths, and I want security of them. And they're willing to do it, he said. Trump said the Ukrainian government was willing to entertain his ideas for equalization of America's close to $300 billion that we've given them in support. The Kyiv Independent reported on Monday that President Zelensky has indeed embraced the concept of sharing Ukraine's resources with its allies as part of his, quote, victory plan for ending the war with Russia. Quote, but for this, security must be guaranteed so that the Russians do not occupy this Ukrainian land with minerals, a source in Zelensky's office added. Right. It's up to you guys to guarantee your own security. It's not up to us. And if we're the ones that are giving you money for your war, then you need to be able to pay for it. You should be compensating us for all of the American taxpayer money that went to you. Well, we've burned up another busy broadcast hour on the program. Remember that what's going on in the House of Representatives today, it's second reading on the budget. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of people wanting to add $345 million to it. Keep your eyeballs peeled on this property tax thing. That's going to be super important. So anyway, we'll be back tomorrow with Open Line Thursday. Of course, that'll be in at 8 a.m., so make sure that you show up for that one and that you actually give me a call. We'll have lots more news and information tomorrow. But for now, from the depths of the Middle Swamp, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics.